What are the flies that you need to catch fish in the UK? I'm going to go over my best 5 patterns for the spring. Now that fish are up and about and feeding regularly, what are the flies that are going to catch them best? I'm going to cover that in this video. I'm going to have a quick chat about why I think these are my best 5 flies for this time of the year, and quite frankly for the rest of the year as well, and how you can catch more fish using them. Let's jump into it. So, a quick explainer to start off. Now that we've moved from the winter time when it's been cold, there's been very little fly life in the water, there's this excitement about fly fishing now in the springtime. We have flies moving again, the weather's getting warmer, it's more comfortable to be out. I feel like I really get in tune with fly fishing during this time of the year. And it's so exciting to be able to start using methods of imitation rather than lures. We can actually try to imitate flies and catch fish visually on the surface, as well as getting those ripping nymph takes. So I'm going to cover the best 5 patterns that you can do, that you can use to cover those fish that are feeding actively on flies in the water column, as well as those fish that are still feeding aggressively and that are taking lures as well. You can actually cover both of them at the same time with a lot of these patterns. So number 1, let's jump into it, has to be buzzers. And the pattern that I am most comfortable with buzzers is this bad boy here. Anything that has a general resemblance of a chironomid. Now, I did cover buzzers in more detail in what's my favourite spring method, and you go ahead and watch that video. I'll pop it in the link in the description if you've not seen it. But it has to be said again in this video that buzzers are such a consistent catcher. When fish are feeding on buzzers, they actually get so intense on just buzzers that they will ignore a lot of other flies. So you can find that you're seeing fish everywhere, fish are actively feeding, and that if you don't have buzzers on, fish are going to be quite likely to just ignore your flies. They are moving through the water column, which is full of buzzers, and they will just be picking out those buzzers. And a lot of the time you can actually see that on larger waters. You can spoon fish and they will just have spoonfuls of, like, literally over a couple 100 grams worth of buzzers in their bellies, and they just kind of have a buffet in front of them. So why would they eat anything else, really? So buzzers is a really important thing to have in a box, and this pattern covers an awful lot of buzzer imitations. Anything that has that sort of quill rib, or any sort of rib really, has those segments that a chironomid nymph has in the water column, and that's an amazing pattern to have. My number 1 on this list is a buzzer. Now, after buzzers, my number 2 would be dowelbacks. Specifically dowelbacks as well. You'll see a lot of people using other nymphs that are all really good, all perfect, but for me, they don't make the cut of the 5 flies to use in spring. These are the 5 flies that I will go to first to try out when I approach a water. That could be a small water, it could be a large open loch style water that you're fishing from the boat. These are the 5 flies that I'm going to be using to try and suss out what's happening. And dowelbacks is number 2. They are such a consistent fish catcher. They imitate buzzers, they imitate those chironomid nymphs really well. They imitate shrimp, they imitate snails sometimes. Like, if a fish is actively feeding on the water column in naturals, but dowelbacks will cover an awful lot of those patterns those flies rather, that the fish are eating in the water column. So, but dowelbacks is an amazing choice to have, and it really does catch a lot of fish. So this is the pattern that I kind of go to at first, but there's so many different patterns as well that you can try out. This is my favorite. Have a try out and see what you enjoy, see what you like. And comment below if you think the dowelbacks are the best nymph that you like. A lot of people like an all-purpose nymph, crunchers, but dowelbacks are definitely my go-to. Number 3 in springtime for me has to be cormorants. Now, cormorants are one of those patterns that it can be fished as a lure, can be fished as a small, very drab lure, and you're catching those fish that are actively feeding aggressively in the water column, which is brilliant. You can fish it as a nymph as well. When it's tied in a certain way, it can be fished as a nymph, and you'll catch fish on actively feeding on buzzers with cormorants as well, which is really good fun, because a lot of those takes that you'll get on cormorants are absolutely screaming takes, and that's exactly why I love fishing cormorants so much. You can fish them 3 straight. You can fish them as a washing line. You can fish them on their own. It's an absolutely amazing pattern. They're so versatile. And this is my number one go-to pattern. Again, you can have them in so many different variations. It's unbelievable. But this is my number one. And when I'm fishing cormorants, to start off at least, this will be on the cast. Absolutely love this. It not only covers those buzzer feeders, but it covers fish that are feeding on fry, covers fish that are just actively feeding in the water column on hatch and emergers. Like, there's so many different things that cormorants can cover if they're tied in a certain way, but this is my favorite. Coming on from cormorants, it has to be on this list for spring fishing, is dry flies. And dry flies at this time of year, this is just as we start to get those hatches, start to get fish feeding much more regularly on dry flies, because you can get them in the winter on dries, but you're not going to really put together a huge bag of fish on dry flies in the winter. In spring, that's when we start to get actively feeding fish on the top. And it is so much fun. It has to be said, dry fly fishing is so much fun. This is my go-to. Any sort of drab, yellow owl pattern with a hare's ear thorax, specifically like the old style yellow owls, that is my go-to. It'll catch fish that are actively feeding on emerging buzzers. You can get even fish that are feeding on terrestrials that are landing on the surface, they'll still take a yellow owl. It's one of those dry flies that just covers so many bases that you can definitely catch fish on in most scenarios with a yellow owl. So number one dry fly for me, yellow owl, and it has to be in the top 5 for best spring flies in general. And lastly, but definitely not by any means least, it has to be the fab. The fab can be fished with all of these flies, without the exception of the dry fly. You can fish every single one of these flies with the fab on the top dropper, pulling them slightly faster as more of an attractor, or you can fish it as a washing line, putting the fab on the point. All of these flies work so well with fabs, and fabs themselves catch so many fish that it has to be in the top 5. Like, my go-to cast, when I first go to a fishery, if I've never fished there before, or even if I have, my starting cast will probably be something like a fab and 2 dalbacks, a fab, 1 dalback, 1 cormorant, 2 cormorants. The fab is the factor that stays on the first cast. Now, if they're not looking at the fab and they're being a little bit more picky, I'll take it off. But the fab is definitely a fish catcher, and it needs to be on this list. If not, be the best fly out of all of them, potentially. But these are my 5 flies. If you have different variations of these in your box, or even just a few of each of these, you're guaranteed to have a good time in spring. These methods are going to cover basically everything that fish are feeding on at this time of year, and you're going to have an amazing time fishing these flies. I know that I certainly am the next time I go out. Please comment below if you have any different other flies that you really, really like that are different to all of these flies that I've laid out in this video. Let me know. And if you've never really used any of these flies, also let me know, and please go and try them out because they're so much fun. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Tight lines. Now, if you want to grab yourself any of the flies in this video or any other fly tying and fly fishing materials, go and check out My Fishing Flies in Grangemouth or on their website, myfishingflies.com. They have loads of stuff from loads of flies, everything you could ever need. Go and check them out. Really high quality stuff, and Dale and Tracy are lovely. They'll help you out. Thanks, guys.